My manager told me I needed to be more of a team player. She had no idea how literally I could take that advice. Vanessa constantly criticized me for working independently, saying I acted like I didn't need anyone else. She'd compare me to Derek, who stayed late helping everyone and never turned down a collaboration request. When I finished a major project solo ahead of schedule, she wrote me up for not consulting the team enough. After I streamlined our workflow without asking permission, she exploded. "You need to start acting like you're part of this department," she said. "Be collaborative for once instead of operating like some lone wolf. How am I supposed to promote someone who thinks they're above teamwork?" I closed my laptop and smiled. "You want a team player? I can do that." The next morning, I arrived an hour early and made coffee for everyone, asking each person how they took it and writing it down in a pink notebook. Vanessa had to explain to upper management why I was suddenly spending work time memorizing coffee preferences instead of doing my actual job, which made her look petty for complaining about someone being helpful. When I finally sat down at my desk, I'd already held up 3 people's mornings by insisting on helping them with things they didn't need help with. I started CCing the entire department on every single email, even routine ones about printer paper and lunch orders. Meetings that used to take 30 minutes now ran 2 hours because I insisted everyone needed to weigh in on the smallest decisions. I refused to make any choice without consensus, which meant Vanessa had to facilitate endless debates about which font to use in presentations. Her own boss asked why our department's productivity had dropped 20% in 2 weeks. When clients called with questions, I put them on hold to consult with the team about answers I already knew, making Vanessa field complaints about our suddenly terrible response times. Her best client threatened to switch to a competitor because a simple question took 3 hours and 4 different people to answer. At the company retreat, I insisted on participating in every single team-building exercise with excessive enthusiasm, volunteering our department for the trust fall activity, where I deliberately hesitated before catching Vanessa, making her stumble. Her face went white with fear for just a second before I steadied her, and everyone saw it. People whispered about why she seemed scared of her own team member. I refused to work on any project alone anymore because collaboration was essential, so Vanessa had to assign me partners for everything, including tasks that took 3 times longer with 2 people. I missed deadlines because my collaborators had their own work to do, and she couldn't complain without admitting her teamwork mandate was backfiring. Our VP started asking pointed questions about department efficiency. The collaboration became performative overkill, scheduling brainstorming sessions for tasks that didn't need brainstorming, taking hours to complete simple assignments because everyone needed input, forwarding every document to Vanessa for approval before proceeding, even on things I was authorized to handle independently. Her inbox overflowed with hundreds of my requests for guidance, and IT had to increase her storage capacity. My hyper-collaborative approach started attracting serious attention from other managers. They praised my team spirit at company meetings, contrasted my willingness to help with Vanessa's seeming inability to make decisions independently. The head of sales started recruiting me for cross-department projects. Our CEO mentioned me specifically during an all-hands as an example of collaborative excellence, while Vanessa sat there seething. Things escalated when I refused to present our quarterly results alone because team players share the spotlight. I insisted Vanessa co-present, then deferred every question to her on stage, making it look like she'd done none of the actual work. The board was confused about why the department head seemed unprepared about her own team's projects. The promotion she'd been expecting went to Derek, who spent the entire presentation highlighting how my collaborative approach had improved team morale while pointedly noting that micromanagement destroys productivity. Monday morning, Vanessa was raging about losing the promotion because of my psychotic team player act. "This has destroyed my credibility," she screamed. "Everyone thinks I can't control my own department." "It's not an act," I said cheerfully while scheduling another unnecessary team meeting. "You wanted collaboration, so this is who I am now." Her phone buzzed with an email from Derek, who'd apparently been documenting every instance where my over-collaboration had slowed down critical projects. I watched Vanessa's expression shift from anger to something calculating as she realized other people were building cases against both of us. "Derek wants to restructure the department," I mentioned casually. "But honestly, I'm thinking about just transferring to sales and dropping this whole collaborative act you demanded." I stood up, careful not to disrupt the 17 browser tabs I had open for various team coordination tools, and smiled. "Turns out I have options now that everyone thinks you've created a dysfunctional environment." Vanessa went very quiet. Something in her expression shifted from rage to cold planning. "You think you've won?" she said softly. "You have no idea what you've started." I felt my breath catch. Vanessa's eyes went hard as she walked to her desk and opened a drawer I'd never seen her access. My stomach dropped when she pulled out a thick file folder with my name and the past 6 weeks of dates printed on the tab. She spread the contents across her desk. Emails I'd sent before my transformation, showing my normal efficient communication style. Performance reviews highlighting my independent work. Screenshots comparing my productivity metrics before and after I started the Team Player Act, showing the deliberate sabotage of my own output. There were recordings too, and she played one where I was on the phone with a vendor using my regular professional voice, not the overeager collaborator persona. The timestamps went back to the day after her initial criticism, showing she'd been documenting my game from the beginning. She clicked through more files, including video from the security cameras showing me arriving early just to make coffee and waste time, the footage clearly demonstrating performative behavior. I kept my cheerful expression, asking what all this meant, while my mind raced through what she might do with this evidence of insubordination. She closed the folder with a sharp snap and said we needed to have a real conversation about consequences. I maintained my bright smile and said I didn't understand what she was worried about, but her cold stare made my skin crawl. That night, I barely slept, reviewing every interaction and wondering what HR would say about deliberate productivity sabotage. Around 3:00 in the morning, I quietly started documenting my own evidence of her initial unreasonable demands, screenshots of her criticisms about my independence, copying emails where she'd written me up for successful solo work. I backed everything up to a personal cloud account she couldn't access. Tuesday morning came too fast, and I maintained the act perfectly while brewing the department's coffee, humming softly and asking about everyone's weekends. But I noticed Vanessa watching me differently now, studying every move like she was planning several steps ahead. She didn't drink her coffee, just sat there observing me flutter between cubicles, offering unnecessary help. When she got up for a meeting, she stopped by my desk and squeezed my shoulder just a little too hard while saying she appreciated my team spirit. Her hand lingered there too long, and it felt like a threat more than appreciation. At lunch, I couldn't focus on my food and kept checking my phone every few minutes. During my break, I finally texted my brother about potentially needing an employment lawyer. He responded immediately asking what happened, and I typed several messages before, just saying it was complicated but important. He said his friend practiced employment law and could talk whenever I needed. That afternoon, I was reorganizing the supply closet when Derek appeared with printouts of our department's declining metrics. He said he'd noticed my transformation and wanted to make sure I was okay, keeping his voice low. I politely said everything was fine while maintaining my enthusiastic tone, but he kept pushing, saying Vanessa's management style was clearly affecting me. I heard Vanessa's heels clicking down the hallway. She was standing there when Derek turned around, and I watched her jaw tighten as she took in Derek's concerned expression and the metrics he was holding. He mumbled something about just checking in and practically ran back to his desk. Vanessa asked quietly if Derek had been bothering me, and I shook my head with wide eyes while mentally mapping the quickest route to HR. The tension during our team meeting was suffocating as Vanessa asked pointed questions about my recent work, wanting to know every detail of every collaboration and why everything was taking so long. I stuck to my cheerful persona, gushing about how wonderful it was to include everyone and how teamwork made the dream work. She asked to see my project timeline after the meeting, and I pulled it up on my laptop while mentally cataloging which executives I could escalate to if needed. She scrolled through my calendar for way too long, clicking on every meeting invitation and reading every note before handing back my laptop without comment. Wednesday morning, I discovered why she'd wanted my calendar when I noticed several of my upcoming meetings had been mysteriously canceled by the organizer. Looking through my emails during a bathroom break, I found auto replies I hadn't set up, apologizing for my reduced availability due to personal performance issues. My hands shook as I stared at the screen, but I left them active temporarily to avoid immediate suspicion. During lunch, I went to a coffee shop 2 blocks away and called my brother's lawyer friend from a table in the back. I explained everything in detail while she took notes, and she said I likely had a case for hostile work environment retaliation, but needed to document everything carefully from this point forward. That evening, I was reviewing project files when my brother knocked on my apartment door, pretending it was a spontaneous visit with dinner. He held up Thai food and said he was in the neighborhood. Vanessa had my personal number from emergency contact forms, but my brother being there felt like safety. We ate while I filled him in on the escalating situation, and he pulled out his phone to take notes. He worked in HR at a different company and knew exactly what documentation I needed. When I mentioned the fake auto replies on my email, his expression darkened. He said that was likely a fireable offense for Vanessa if we could prove it. Thursday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from work. Vanessa had apparently sent an email at 6 a.m. claiming I'd failed to submit a critical client deliverable, copying executives I'd never even met. I pulled up my sent folder and found the deliverable right there, submitted 3 days early, but someone had moved it to my trash folder and emptied it. I immediately forwarded the email metadata to my personal account, showing the submission timestamp, then called IT to report the security breach. The IT director seemed concerned about the mysterious trash activity and said they'd investigate. I called my brother next, and he said to go into work but document everything that happened. When I arrived, Vanessa was in a meeting with our VP. She'd scheduled it without telling me, supposedly to discuss my performance issues. I was called in halfway through, walking into a room where Vanessa had already laid groundwork about my recent decline in work quality and increasingly erratic behavior. I calmly pulled out my phone and showed the VP the submission timestamp for the supposedly missing deliverable, along with screenshots of the metadata showing it had been manually deleted from my trash folder after hours. The VP's expression changed rapidly from concerned to confused to angry. She asked Vanessa directly if she had access to my email folders, and Vanessa tried to deflect. The meeting ended with the VP saying she needed to investigate this immediately and asking both of us to remain available. I went back to my desk while Vanessa returned to her office, and I could see her through the glass wall making urgent phone calls. It called me an hour later asking to examine my computer for forensic evidence of the security breach. A technician came to my desk with logging software and spent 30 minutes pulling access records. He looked grim when he found what he was looking for, but wouldn't tell me details, just said it would be in his report to the VP. Friday morning, I was called to HR along with Vanessa. The VP was there too, along with the head of IT and someone I didn't recognize from legal. They walked us through the findings. Vanessa had used her administrative access to manipulate my email folders, cancel my meetings, and set up auto replies without my knowledge. She'd violated multiple company policies around data privacy and abuse of authority. The legal representative explained this constituted a hostile work environment and potential grounds for wrongful termination if they'd fired me based on the false evidence. Vanessa tried to explain she was just trying to document my sabotage of department productivity, pulling out her folder of evidence about my deliberate performance decline. I took a deep breath and admitted everything about my petty revenge game, starting with her criticism of my independence, then my decision to take her team player demand to absurd extremes. I showed them the original write-up for completing work too independently, explained how I deliberately over-collaborated to make a point. The room went silent as I described making everyone's coffee and CCing the entire department and insisting on consensus for printer paper. HR looked horrified at the whole situation. The VP actually laughed when I described the trust fall incident making Vanessa stumble, but the legal representative's expression stayed serious. They explained that while my behavior was unprofessional and petty, Vanessa's response had crossed legal lines into potential criminal activity with the email tampering. Vanessa was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. I was given a formal warning for my collaborative sabotage but allowed to return to work with a clean slate if I dropped the act immediately. They also strongly suggested I consider transferring to a different department to avoid ongoing conflict. That weekend, my brother helped me apply to internal positions in 3 different divisions. The sales team Derek had mentioned responded within hours, wanting to interview me the following week. My brother's lawyer friend said I could potentially file a civil suit against Vanessa personally for the email tampering, but suggested waiting to see how the company's investigation concluded. Monday morning felt surreal walking into the office knowing Vanessa wasn't there. Derek had been appointed interim manager and immediately scheduled a team meeting to address the elephant in the room. He acknowledged that both Vanessa and I had handled things badly, but emphasized moving forward professionally. People actually laughed when he said collaboration was important, but making coffee for 30 people wasn't a productive use of anyone's time. The sales department interview went well, and they offered me a lateral transfer with a small raise by Wednesday. I accepted immediately, grateful to escape the dysfunctional environment I'd helped create. My last day in Vanessa's department was Friday, and I spent it transitioning my actual work to colleagues and deleting all the unnecessary collaborative documents I'd created. 2 weeks into my new position, HR called to inform me that Vanessa had been terminated for the email tampering and abuse of administrative access. They'd also found evidence she'd been monitoring several employees' communications without cause, building cases against anyone she perceived as a threat. My situation had triggered a broader investigation that revealed a pattern of controlling behavior. Derek sent me a message saying the department's productivity had improved 30% since I left and Vanessa was fired. People could work independently again without fear of being written up. He apologized for not standing up to Vanessa's unreasonable expectations sooner, saying he'd been afraid of becoming her next target. A month after the transfer, I ran into Vanessa at a coffee shop near the office. She looked thinner, tired, with circles under her eyes. She tried to apologize, explaining she'd felt threatened by my competence and reacted poorly. I listened without interrupting, then told her I hoped she found a better fit elsewhere, and left without giving her false forgiveness I didn't feel. My therapist helped me work through the guilt about my revenge, escalating to the point where someone lost their job. We explored my passive-aggressive response to conflict and healthier ways to address workplace issues. She pointed out that while my collaborative sabotage was petty, Vanessa's criminal tampering with my email showed her true character underneath the professional facade. 3 months later, I was thriving in sales with a manager who valued independent work and clear communication. My productivity metrics were back to their original high levels, and I'd closed 2 major accounts. The sales VP pulled me aside to say she was glad Derek had recommended me for the transfer. 6 months after everything ended, I got an email from an attorney representing Vanessa. She was suing the company for wrongful termination, claiming my deliberate sabotage had justified her monitoring of my work. The company's legal team contacted me to provide testimony about the timeline of events. I spent 4 hours giving a deposition, walking through every petty detail of my collaborative revenge and every instance of her escalating control. The case was settled out of court a month later. I never learned the terms, but the company's attorney mentioned that Vanessa's documented pattern of abuse toward multiple employees had made her wrongful termination claim essentially worthless. She withdrew the lawsuit in exchange for a neutral reference and no admission of guilt from either party. Work became normal again slowly. I learned to advocate for myself without playing petty games. When my new manager suggested I was working too independently on a project, I scheduled a meeting to discuss collaboration expectations clearly instead of performing malicious compliance. We reached a reasonable compromise about checkpoints without anyone losing their job. Dating felt impossible at first, but my therapist kept reminding me that not every boss was Vanessa. I met someone at my brother's wedding 9 months after everything ended. He worked in accounting and understood workplace dynamics. When I told him the collaboration story over dinner, he laughed but also recognized why I'd felt cornered enough to do it. My brother started calling himself my career advisor whenever workplace issues came up. His wife introduced me to her book club, normal people with normal jobs who'd never heard of my dramatic exit from the old department. They elected me treasurer after I'd been coming for 3 months, trusting me with actual responsibility. A full year after leaving Vanessa's department, I was buying office supplies when someone called my name. One of my old teammates stood there with a basket of pens looking relieved to see me. She said Derek was doing great as the permanent manager and the whole team was healthier without Vanessa's toxicity. She mentioned Vanessa was working at a much smaller company now, apparently still in therapy working through control issues. I thanked her for the update but kept the conversation brief, paid for my supplies, and left without dwelling on the past. My therapist high-fived me at our next session for handling it so well. She said my progress was remarkable, that I'd learned to set boundaries and communicate needs without elaborate revenge schemes. The promotion I got after a year in sales felt earned through actual merit. I managed my own small team now, and nobody questioned whether I deserved it based on my ability to work independently or collaboratively as situations required. I hired my first direct report and made sure to clearly communicate expectations about work-style flexibility. Sometimes I'd catch myself over-explaining decisions or asking for unnecessary input when independent action made more sense. Those moments got rarer, though. My team appreciated clear direction and trusted autonomy. We collaborated when it added value and worked independently when it made sense. Looking back now, I see how we both made terrible choices that fed off each other. I pushed too hard with my revenge, and she showed her true controlling nature when challenged. The whole thing could have been resolved with one honest conversation about work-style preferences if either of us had been mature enough to have it. These days, I work however is most effective for each project, collaborate when it adds value, and make independent decisions within my authority. I can send emails without CCing the entire company and complete projects without performative consensus building. My new manager respects my judgment and trusts me to ask for help when I need it. The sales VP asked me to lead a major account restructuring last month, and I built a cross-functional team of people with relevant expertise. We collaborated efficiently without my old performative nonsense, finished ahead of schedule, and I made sure everyone got credit for their contributions. The client was thrilled with our work. Vanessa tried reaching out through LinkedIn a few times, but I ignored the connection requests. My therapist said I didn't owe her anything, including closure or forgiveness. My career moved forward without that chapter affecting my reputation. The company had actually protected my privacy during the investigation, so most people never knew the full story. Life feels professional and stable in the best way now. I work at whatever style each project requires, not performing anything for anyone's expectations. The coffee at work tastes the same whether I make it or someone else does. My new manager writes my name correctly on performance reviews with actual constructive feedback. I'm finally just myself again at work, and that's enough. That's the whole story wrapped up. If even one piece of it gave you something to think about, then it was worth sharing.